So, I'm a little late. I'm going to be honest. Last week, I think it was either Friday or Saturday, I said we'd give the format 2 or 3 days. And then I'd come back to it on, say, like Wednesday this week. And have another good look at the format and how it's evolved according to dueling book statistics that we can get. It's Friday. But it's fine. It just meant that the format got an extra couple of days to solidify itself in one way or another, so that we can have a look online on ygeoscope.com, which pulls all the data from Dueling Book that it can get from the public realm, where you have your deck list properly named and can actually pull the win-loss records of those decks and compiles it onto a single spreadsheet. Spreadsheet? I don't know if that's the right term to use, but we can at least look down the decks being played, how many times they're being played, their wins, their losses, and then broken down by percentage. And we can also look at individual cards being played in matches and how much those cards win and lose games when they are seen. So, without further ado, I haven't checked these figures. I have no idea what we're looking at. But, as a preface, as I've said before in the previous video, a deck to be classified tier 0 needs a really high win percentage of somewhere akin to like 75 to 80%. It needs to just be always winning no matter what to be considered tier 0. Like, that's the only deck you can play. The last time we saw that was like Zodiac format. We haven't really seen that since. And like Full Power Spiral, for instance. If you want to be considered tier 1, you need to be able to win 66% of all of your matches or better, or of your games or better. Once you have that kind of win-loss record, it means you can win 2 out of every 3 games, which means that you have the ability to take matches convincingly just because of your deck's power, strictly speaking. And then you add the player skill behind it and it can get even better. If you want to be considered tier 2, you need a 60% rating or better, which means you win 3 out of every 5 games, which means that you have the ability to take matches. But you might end up in a situation where you might just lose 2 games in a row, simply because that was the 40% time, those 2 games in a row, where you just open deck and can't play. If you're 50% or higher on your win-loss record, you're considered tier 3 or rogue. If you're below 50%, you're a non-contender. That's how I break down my positions between, which decks to look at for tier 0, 1, 2, rogue, non-contender, okay? Now, if we hit card statistics, we'll get the last 7 days worth of results. However, because it is April 10th, the day that I'm looking at this, in Central Australian time, we can hit use current data and we can have a look at everything from April 1st to now. Now, before, I think Salmon Great had 4,500 games played, so we've definitely had an update on count. Wow, everyone is doubling down on salads. Whoa. Alright. This is already quite surprising, as you'll probably realize from a cursory look right now. Not much has changed in where all of them have been played, though we do have a new deck in here in the Eldic. Let's have a quick look. I think these counts have really gone up. Like, the first page is almost 1,000 down to the bottom 2 here, so we have quite a representation of all of the decks, down to Infernoid and Blue Eyes, which are just straight up non-contenders. We don't look at this 29%. Why is that even being played? Come on. Alright, so let's have a look at this. So, not surprising here, we're still only seeing one deck with a percentage rating that I would consider to be tier 1, and it is once again Invoked Mech Knight at 66%. It has dropped 3 points. Granted, it wasn't really at critical mass before. It only had 1,000 rounds played. Now it's at 2,000, so it's got a bit more under it. But it's still the only deck on this page right now that can be considered tier 1. You might be able to stick Eldlick behind it at 65, but only barely. Only barely. And I'd call that more it being a brand new deck. People probably haven't adjusted to it yet, because I think it was only released a few days ago. But going from the top, we have Salamangreat, 10,000 decks played, 56% win rate. That's a tier 2 deck. As far as I'm concerned, that is not a win rate that takes matches, as we probably see. Zodiac, for some reason, everyone is taking this, even though Broad Ball is still banned. 55% with just under 6,000 rounds played. That's actually not bad, considering we've got a deck with only 1 Barrage, 1 Dryden, no Broad Ball. But now it's got 3 Avarice, so maybe there's something to do with it there. Dinosaurs, the Go Second variant with Lost World, is at 56%. Again, it's the same as Salamangreat, nothing surprising here. Altergeist at 62%. It was holding there about before, I think it was at 61%. after 3 days of the meta. So this is not surprising to me in the least. It's the best trap control deck right now, the format. I think it's better than Guru Control as it stands, and it looks like the percentages line up for that. We'll get to that in a second. Eldlick, the new zombie support deck, is at 65%. I'm going to call this strictly people haven't adjusted to how the deck operates yet. Are probably needing to look at tuning their side decks to counter the deck. Give this another week. I'd like to see where it goes, but right now it's very powerful. I'm not going to take anything away from it. It is very powerful. I will just be very wary about what happens when people start finally adjusting for it, if there's an adjustment that you can make to counter the deck. Orcust at 54%. Again, Babel is still alive, but this isn't a win-loss record that you can consider tier 2. This is Rogue at best. Shadow at 45%. Pure Shadow without the Invoked to back it up simply doesn't do enough. Just Winder Construct can be outed so well. You need the whole combo to go off. You need like Winder, Construct, Apollosa. You need everything else to go off with it. And that's a 3-card combo. And straight up from that point, as soon as you start relying on 3-card combos or higher, you start getting beaten by decks that are simple 1 or 2-card combos. Like just simply adding in Invoked, one engine, what is that, like 9, 10 cards if you include the Terraforming, and suddenly that Alistair puts in so much work for the deck. It gets you Macabre, it gets you a Link 2, if not a Link 3, and at its very worst, it's Macabre Pass with a 5-card hand, which can be everything to the deck. So you can't just play Pure Shadow and expect it to take matches right now. And also the boards are just too easily outable. Sky Strike at 52%. This is because Widowmaker went back to 2. I still don't think this is a good contender deck until we either get every other card for Sky Striker off the ban list, and I'm including Hornet Drones in that, with Engage banned, or we get Engage back to 1. Until we get something like that, one of those two, everything else unbanned, but Engage at 0, or Engage at 1, leave everything where it is, I don't think you'll see this percentage go above 60%, and for most people, they'll sit there and go, thank Christ for that. I actually thought it was a completely fair deck. I didn't think banning Engage was actually necessary. Just make decks that are better than Sky Striker. Imagine Sky Striker playing now when you've got offensive Scythe through Union Carrier. You simply don't play. Invoke Shadow, as I said, 54%. So there's a difference. You just add the Invoked engine and you get a 9% increase to your win-loss record based on this. They've got fairly equivalent times played, and it just goes to show how much Invoked does in that deck. You add Alistair, the Invoker of Madness, and you've got triple Invocation. If you really want, you can take in the Book of the Law, and you can play shenanigans with that. But the boards of like Macabre, Caliga, Winder, Construct, Apollosa, or the nuts boards that this stuff can come up with, and it gives you so many more options to go by. It's so much more resilient. It's so much more versatile to just playing pure Shadow. So just always play Invoke Shadow. Subterra is the second best control deck right now, sitting at 61%. This doesn't surprise me in the least, because all you gotta do is change your Floodgates or 2, go to Triple Strike, Triple Judgment, and suddenly you can continue playing. Lightning Storm actually didn't do as much as I thought it would against the control decks. It's still a blowout, but when you've got Triple Judgment, and in the case of like Orcust on Subterra, Fiendus can negate Lightning Storm. You have multiple ways to stop those big board wipes. So I was actually rather surprised to still see this repping anything over 50% win-loss record, especially because on Dueling Book, everyone's a billionaire, so everyone can get access to Lightning Storm on an online simulator. This surprises me, and it's also surprising that right now it is the third highest percentage win-loss in the top 10. You go Eldlick, then Altergeist, then Subterra. Like all the other decks that people were so hyped for, from Salamangreat to Dinosaur to Zodiac to Orcust to Invoke Shadow, they're not repping 60% or higher. Something to keep in mind. Now below this, people will start considering this all tier 2 just based on representation. I don't do that. They have 1,000 or more times played, so these are all contenders. Heroes at 52%. This is kind of an issue with Heroes where if it eats one hand trap, specifically on Stratos or a hero lives, it kind of comes to a dead stop. Adamancipator is another new deck at 60%. Again, I call this a it's tier 2 at the moment. I will call it tier 2 at the moment. But at the same time, people need time to adapt to these new decks, this one and Eldlick. When that happens, I will not be surprised if this percentage drops, but then at the same time, then the counter adaptation that happens with people piloting the deck. So it'd be very interesting to see, say, this time next week, if this and Eldlick can keep the percentage ratings above 60% on Dueling Book. If they can pull that off, then we may finally have a new archetype in the meta that Konami has released that we can actually play and be competitive with, which should actually be like such a refreshing thing to see. We have Mermail at 53%. This is mainly because it can set up the infinite negate combo with Simorgs, but also back it up with a way to stop the way to break it, which is the, I can't remember, it's like an Abyss Scale. So one of the equip spells that can just straight up negate a monster, spell, or trap effect at the point of resolution. It doesn't activate to do the negation. So they got like Dark Ruler, you can it just auto negates it for you. So it does have ways to stop the Dark Ruler. But it's also just got, it can also rip 2 cards out of your hand in the process of setting up the infinite negate. So there is processes for this deck to actually do things now. But again, 53%, there's not much really there to run home about. It's lucky to be over 50% now. Before it was at 42, I think it was. We have Cyber Dragons at 52%. If you're going to play a Go Second deck, play Dinos. Cyber Dragon just doesn't do enough. There's too many auto outs to Cyber Dragons, unfortunately. And then the wild card, once again, is Invoked Mech Knight, dropping 3 points down to 66%. Again, this is so surprising to me. But I think it's just because this deck has the ability to push and push and push and push through these Go First decks. Plus things like main deck Gamma, main deck Nibiru, main deck Dark Rulers. Just break your board and then set up a couple of negates, and then everything is fine. So it'd be very interesting to see if it can keep that tier 1 status, because I'm considering that tier 1. It's 66%. It was 69% when I did this for last week. It's held that tier 1 status of being 66% or higher, which is very surprising to me. I did not think an old deck like that would be able to come out, but it does say something for the power level of the format. It's very low. So we're going back to these old decks. I remember when this deck used to lose to Sky Striker Trickstar. You know, that's 2017. So, 2017, 2018. Oh, a while ago. We have Pure Invoked at 53%. Again, by itself, it doesn't do enough. You're just putting Macabre on board. You need to tech it with another engine. That's where Invoked Mech Knight and Invoked Shadow comes in. Don't worry about playing Pure Invoked. Play one of the other 2 sub-engines. If you already have Invoked, go buy 3 structure decks and play Invoked Shadow. Simple as that. Burning Abyss, 43%. Doesn't have a win condition. Enough said. Thunder Dragons, 56%. This format is slow enough that Titan control is viable. And that's scary when with that low power. It makes sense now why Colossus is banned. Could you imagine still having Colossus at 1 in this format? Thunder Dragons would still be the best deck with just 1 Colossus. It wouldn't matter. You go Titan control, add a 1 Colossus, and all these decks that search can't search anymore. That would be nuts. Pure Danger, 49%, never been a contender, doesn't have a win condition. Mystic Mind Burn down to 49%. Again, as long as we're still main decking back row removal and things like Cosmic Cyclone, Mind Burn can never be tier 2 or tier 1. It's when all those back row hate cards end up on a ban list is when we end up with an issue. This is why I'm not a big fan of banning things like Twin Twister, Cosmic Cyclone, MST. People that hate those cards that can go 2 for 2, 2 for 1. Heavy Storm Dust is another contender. I have big issues with hitting those cards. The issue that I have is when we have mass back row removal and things like Evenly Matched and Lightning Storm. Evenly Matched at least can be played around, but Lightning Storm, you go second, see a copy of that, wipe out 6 back row, and then you just win. I think that's just too much. And while those cards still exist, you need a main decked archetypal negation that can negate those kinds of cards of Dark Ruler, not Dark Ruler, the Lightning Storm and Evenly Matched are the 2 main contenders. Mindburn doesn't have that, it's simply relying on judgments. So while that's the case, it'll never be a really good contender, but it's always going to be the one that beats you if you don't have back row removal main decked in your decks. Always take in a couple Cosmic Cyclones just in case you see this bastard. DDDs at 47%. As I said, it can't negate monster effects in the hand. They must be on the field. It also can't negate them in the grave. So that's already a big issue for DDDs. The big hype for this deck to be playable in this new Master Rule, it was basically squashed as soon as you read the effects of the better DDDs. Their negations are just not as all-encompassing as what some of the other top-tier decks can do. So it can't be a contender until, again, the format drops to its power level, which would require the hitting of like 15 decks right now. Pendulum, Endymion Mythical Beast Pendulum Magician Spellbook at 56%. This is because we have Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity, along with a few other bits and pieces that we can do, like Union Carrier, like Needle Fiber. I played around with this deck, 56% sounds about right, because it's, again, a deck that requires 3 or 4 cards in their hand to do combo, because we do not have Electromite. The second that you start relying on Pendulum Magicians again, you need Pendulum Call, you need sets, you need proper scales, you need harmonizing, and a good set of cards to pen summon from your extra deck. And usually to do that, it was Electromite that was tying that all together. While that's banned, I don't think we can see this deck anywhere higher than 60%. Bring back Electromite. It did nothing wrong. Anti-Spell Fragrance is a card. We just simply cannot play anti-Spell. Give us back Electromite to 1. Hell, give us it back to 3. I guarantee you Invoke Mekk-Knight will still beat us. Frog Mermail at 54% to non-contender. Infernoid at 51%. I think some of these other decks right now just simply out the Infernoid player, but this is a really high skill capped deck. Like, you gotta know exactly what effect to use and when, and sometimes you just don't open a way to Decatron, so as soon as that happens, it's just a dead game, right? And then Blue Eyes at 29%, we don't look at that. That's people playing legacy decks. So that's the meta on Dueling Book at the moment. And as I said before, to be considered tier 1, in my mind, you need a win-loss record percentage rate of 66% or more. The ability to win 2 out of every 3 games. And there's only one deck that does that right now, and that's Invoked Mekk-Knight. Still. Which is, again, it's really, really surprising. Maybe there's something I'm missing about some of these other decks on the top, but it just seems very odd that Salamangreat can't pull a 66% win rate. Eldlick is close. Altergeist can't do it. Invoke Shadow, for all the hype that deck got, it is not pulling the kind of win-loss record that you would expect for something that was pulling that much hype. It's all come down to Invoked Mekk-Knight, which is very, very odd indeed. So right now, if you're thinking of going into a big, any kind of big like online tournament, here's the decks that you should probably look out for just based on representation. Salads, Zodiac, and Dino, and Altergeist, just based on representation. Based on current hype, Eldlick, and the Adamancipator, the new decks that came out from, I forget what it was called. It was the new one that came out earlier this week, because they are new, so people are not going to be prepared for it. Give it a read, have a look what those cards do, understand their win conditions so that you can play against it. But then if you're looking against decks that you need to play against simply based on their win-loss record, quite simply, Altergeist, as we said, Guru Control, and Invoked Mekk-Knight. It's very weird. You've got like 10 different decks to worry about going into any kind of format. So here's what would be my advice to you right now if you're looking at going on to any online tournament of any kind, such as Simo's Crush Card Virus tournament that he's got coming up. Play the deck that you're most comfortable with, period. Because I think right now it's going to be your skill level versus these decks that's really going to carry you over the line more than anything else. Play the deck you're most comfortable with that also is as consistent as you can possibly make it. Prepare your side decks to be as generic as possible. Keep it well-rounded. Don't lock yourself down to just versing things like Salamangreat and Orcus, because then you get blown out by the Dino player. But if you're only preparing for Dino and Invoke Shadow, Guru Control and Altergeist will wreck you. So keep it as diverse as you possibly can. When you look at your side deck, try and make sure that you basically have 4 cards or 5 cards, optimally 5 if you can, that you can side in for your worst 10 matchups. If you can pull something like that off, and those matchups of course being decks that you'll actually see in a competitive environment, if you can pull that off right now, A, I'd be exceedingly surprised, but B, means that you'll be prepared for almost anything to come your way, even if something you haven't prepared for. You might have somebody suddenly come up to you and be like, oh, by the way, I'm playing pure Endymion, and you're like, well, I was prepared for the Endymion mythical beast pendulum magician shenanigans, so I'm ready for you. And just do things on that nature. Someone coming up playing Paleozoic Frog, and you're sitting there going, well, guess what? I've already got my mass back row removal and lightning storms because I was ready for Subterrors. So if you keep your side deck like that, then I think you'll have a good chance in any kind of online tournament. But as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to this kind of format right now, it is wide open still. It'll be wide open until probably until the Megatins get released, where we get Red Eyes Dragoon, which is coming out soon. Until then, I don't think this meta is ever going to define itself. We'll give it another week. I think I might make this like just a consistent thing, just like every Friday afternoon if I'm home. We'll have a quick look at these numbers on Dueling Book, especially until we get past this coronavirus pandemic of COVID-19. Because this is all we've basically got to go off of. We have no YCS as a regionals to go off of. but we'll keep an eye on this. And if at any point you want to have a look at this yourself, best thing you can do is go to ygeoscope.com. You'll have these 3 sections up here. Don't even look at previous format. We don't care for that. If you hit current format data, you'll have all of the format data. It says since January 20, they haven't fixed this. It's the current format from April 1st. And if you just hit card statistics, you'll get the last 7 days. You'll get the most recent stuff. You can also break it down by match decks, so the decks played per matches. Match cards, so you can look at individual cards played in matches and what their win-loss records are, and then you can break it down to decks played in single games, in unranked, and same thing with single cards being played, games being played, single games, cards, unranked. You can have a look at those win-loss percentages as well, and you can look at this at any time. It is a free service to use. So that is going to call from here, but let me know what you think about those on YouTube when I get this over to there. Let me know what you think is going to be the deck with the highest percentage win-loss record by the end of this format, because right now I'm still hedging my bets on like Invoked Mech Knight or Eldlik at the moment, because they're holding their percentages. Invoked Mech Knight took a 3 percentage point hit over the last week, and Eldlik has shot up to 65% in 3 days. So I'd be very interested to see what you people think would be the best deck of the format, and try to leave some reasoning behind it, because I'd be very interested to hear about it.